God-given structural things.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I'm so happy to have you over. I'm glad that we're doing this. This is going to be a lot of fun, and hopefully it'll be so fun that you think I must come back.
Oh, excellent, excellent.
I think that'll be the business. Okay, welcome everybody to today's Eat and Greet, where technology and Mercury retrograde are not coming for me today, and I feel real grateful all the way around. And today we're going to talk about electional astrology, which I'm a big fan of. And so I went out and got the guy. Like, you're the guy,
Yeah,
Omari.
I'm the guy.
You're the guy. So welcome, Omari Martin, to the Eat and Greets today.
Thank you, Stormy Grace. Certainly a pleasure to be here. And, when we first spoke, I was just really like, oh, this is going to be different because we're going to eat and greet. And I just want the audience to know that Brother Omari is here with his seedless, what is this? Premium Autumn Crisp, fresh California grown seedless green grapes. So I'm here. I'm ready. Look here. Let me eat one right now.
Yes, let's have a snack together. Today I
Mhm.
have watermelon, fresh cut. So, all of that housekeeping out of the way. What are you guys eating today? Let me know in the comment box over here, and welcome everybody. Today is going to be good. And hopefully, in this next hour or so, we give you something that was absolutely worth the time you took to show up and watch it. And I don't know about you, but I find electional to be fascinating. You know, that we can literally go in and attempt to pinpoint the most auspicious times for things where it's like energetically, this is sound. You can have a good kind of swipe at this opportunity at this time. So I find electional to be fascinating. What's your take?
Um, excuse me, I find it to be fascinating as well. And I really believe there is a time and a season for everything under the sun, no matter what it is. And electional astrology can be used as a tool to identify a time for which that particular activity or event will be most successful, so to speak. And in electional astrology, I've had fun with it, and I've had some success with the tool, electional astrology, for myself as well as for clients.
And so, in your particular client base, do you do a lot of electional astrology more than anything else, or what's kind of your mix?
Well, for me, what I really found is that electional astrology has become my niche, my groove that I really like. I've had, as I just mentioned, some successes with it, huge successes with it for myself and for clients. And I like it. I look at transits and progressions as well, but I've really found for me, electional astrology is where it's at. And so, in terms of client work, students ask me, not students, excuse me, clients ask me about surgery. um, Last year, a client reached out to me about divorce. Actually, it was the mother of the client who reached out to me. When would it be a good time for her son to get a divorce?
Sure, she was like, I'm just trying to make sure it sticks. I've been trying to get rid of this heifer for a minute.
Yeah, so it's things of that nature, surgery, elective surgery, of course, divorce. One client reached out to me, when should he take a trip? And actually, that's one chart we'll look at today because I'm sure many of us are looking forward to that period in time when it's safe to travel. In particular, an international trip or from one part of the United States to the other part of the US. So we'll be looking at one of those as a travel chart. We'll look at one of those today.
That is phenomenal. Now, before we get into all of this, all the meat and potatoes of electional astrology, how did you get into astrology in the first place? What was your entry?
My entry into astrology started by reading an astrology column in the Chicago Sun-Times, written by Sidney Omar. And that column was in the Sun-Times for years. So around the age of 8, a friend and I would look at the astrology column in the Chicago Sun-Times, and that was really how I discovered astrology. And I just thought it was cool. And just so happened that her and I both are Libras. I'm a September Libra. She's an October Libra. And so we'd always read the section about Libra, and then other sections about family members, you know, if we knew their zodiac sign or something to that effect. So that's how it started for me at age 8.
It's so good. I knew there was a Venetian vibe going on here today. Let me tell you, it was actually really funny. You did a talk another time, another presentation, and I didn't know your sign or anything about you then. But when I saw, you know, you came on screen, I was like, oh, he got Venus. This man is keyed to the tune of Venus somewhere in here. Where is this? Venus the outline planet? He's not being modified by anything. What is it? And now I know.
Yeah, Sun in Libra.
Well, I support. Okay, so you got in, you're reading the sun column, you're doing that, and then it advances. At what point did you look around and say, I got to really do some astrology?
Okay. In my early 20s, I did have spiritual experiences in which I would think about someone, and a few moments later, the phone would ring and it would be that person. So we want to keep in mind, this is before smartphones, cell phones. This was before pagers. And the phone would ring and it would be that individual. I wasn't expecting for them to call, and it was someone maybe who I had not talked to in about 6 months or 12 months or so. In addition to that, on occasion, I'd have a dream about someone. And at that time, though these types of experiences were new to me and seemed to be a little odd. And so one day I did have the nerve to share a dream I had about my life coach. And the dream was about the relationship between her and her mother. And I shared the details with her, blah, blah, blah. And she acknowledged that the details that I shared with her that occurred in my dream were actually true. And this was information that she had never shared with me about the relationship between her and her mother. So as a result of, a combination of those types of experiences happening, I just knew I could no longer write it off as a coincidence. And it's like, there's something to this. Not that I knew what it was at the time, I didn't.
Sure.
But I'm like, there's something to this, and I want to learn more about it. And the first and foremost thing that I knew to turn to was astrology.
And there you are. You're in the saddle, huh?
In the saddle, you start off, you get one book. So my first two books that I did borrow from a neighbor, and I want the whole world to know I never returned the two books. I didn't still have them. Don't loan me your books. I'm going to tell you that now. Do not loan me your books. You're not getting it back or getting them back. And I won't be loaning you any of my books either. It's not personal. Okay.
Except that it is, because you're like, I can't loan out because I know I don't give back. I can't live that karmic life.
That's right. No karma, baby. No karma. So my first two books, The Only Astrology Book You'll Ever Need by Joanna Woolfolk, and Astrology of Cosmic Science by Isabel Hickey. So those are my first two astrology books ever. I still have them, those same copies of the books, and they were good books for me to start off with. And then from there, the first time I had my astrology chart done, I never met the astrologer. The neighbor who I borrowed my first two astrology books from, he actually knew the astrologer and had the astrologer to do my chart. And then he gave it to me and I looked at it and I was like, wow, what does all this mean? And I could look and see the numbers on the house cusp and numbers right next to the planets. And I could see, oh, this is mathematically based. And it was important to me to learn the mathematics of astrology. I just had to know how it ticks. I'm like, what makes it tick? What makes it work? Now, of course, you can calculate a chart by hand to be all precise with the numbers, and that's a great thing. But even after that, it's more to it than that. You know, the interpretation, well, the analysis and the interpretation are equally important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's interesting because you don't just run around this planet and do astrology, right? You have a whole other day job or normal
Hmm.
job that you've got going
Hmm.
on, and I think it's interesting because it has to do with numbers. You're the
Yes,
numbers man.
that's correct. So I'm a college professor for a local community college, and I teach accounting, finance, and banking classes. So I guess I do have this thing for numbers to some extent. And yeah, so for those of us who take on becoming professional astrologers, I mean, I think we all should, you know, get a pat on the back for being some of the most courageous risk takers,
Mhm.
because there is no carrot on the end of the stick per se in terms of a job in corporate America or with the government or a job in academia per se, where you will be hired to teach accounting or teach astrology or to do something directly related to astrology. So when we take that on, I mean, we're really taking it on based on our passion about it, our interest in it, and our commitment to just learn it and to be able to effectively work with that tool.
Mhm. And I think that it's brilliant. And I look forward to having you back on as I build the business side, because if you are thinking about taking on astrology, the backside of having a business is still really important in understanding how to do that and navigate that and make that work. So,
Mhm.
you know, I
Yeah,
think,
that's very important.
yeah.
And I actually created a second astrology business in response to that. And it's astropreneurship, which is astrology and entrepreneurship combined. And in having the opportunity to meet and greet astrologers all over the country, and then as of last year, over the world, took a trip to New Delhi, India. I
Mm,
find that while some astrologers, they're very good astrologers, which is great. But as you just mentioned, Stormy, when it comes to the business side of it, um, they could come up short, so to speak, by simply maybe not knowing about business through academic training and development, or maybe having no prior experience as a business owner. And it's not much different from, I want to say, maybe the entertainment industry. You know, we have some singers or entertainers. They are extraordinary performers on stage, but when it comes to the business side, their knowledge or interest trails off a little bit.
mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and you know what? That's why it's like you got to surround yourself with the right kind of squad so that you can, you can have the kind of that full safe package and make
Hmm.
it profitable. I'm just a big fan. First of all, I'm a Taurus, then all of the rest of the Libras in my
Oh, that's
second house.
right. That's right. Yeah, yeah, money. You money sign people, but we're both
Yes,
ruled by Venus, and we both have on blue today. I
I
say we
know.
got the message right.
We got the message. It came through universally. So let's get ready to get into this. I know people are ready for this topic. And if you are new, or even if you're not new and you've just never heard about electional astrology or event astrology and what it's about, we're going to walk through that just a little bit. But it is a really neat kind of concept. And I also learned that if you walk an electional chart backward, you should end up in horary astrology, because you should be able to answer the yes to what you just found out. So it's really, really a neat concept. So I'm gonna be quiet for a minute and eat my watermelon and let
Yeah,
you
let me
tell us
eat one
about
more grape. Hold on, everybody. Just
just,
one more grape. One more
just
grape. Hold on.
one
Okay.
more to get prepared, right? Now, if you're watching
Hmm.
QI, Omari's getting his grape going. Remember that after this is over, if you're watching on the replay, you can always come and watch the eat and greets completely ad free by joining me on Patreon, and that is in the description box down below, so you can come over and join me. And yes, indeed, you can grab YouTube Premium and see everything ad free. But remember that YouTube Premium doesn't necessarily support your content creators. And the plug is done. the plugs in the jug.
Okay, great. Excellent. So today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to touch on, I'll share a few things about myself with you. We're going to talk about electional astrology, like, some background foundational things. We'll take a look at the Zodiacal Man, a travel chart. We'll look at a business chart with declinations. And this is something that may appeal to those of you who are thinking about starting your own business. And declinations, it's a little more technical, but we'll cover that because that's important as well. We'll also take a look at how you can benefit from a void of course moon. So some of you may be familiar with, oh, let's not do it right now. The moon is void of course. Well, again, as I stated earlier, there's a time and season for everything under the sun. And there's a time and season which you can take advantage of a void of course moon. We'll take a look at a credit card application, a marriage chart, and then I'll talk a little bit about the planetary hours. And with the planetary hours, you can actually refine your electional chart.
I'm so excited right now. Like,
Great,
I feel like class is in session. I'm like, yes.
Yes, class is in session.
Here.
Yes.
Yes, I'm here for the astro nourishment.
Astro nourishment. I love it.
Yes, and it fills your soul and doesn't make you fat. So that's nice.
Love it, love it, love it, love it. So very quickly, as I stated earlier, I'm a college professor, former dean of faculty administration for American Intercontinental University, bachelor's degree in accounting from Howard University. Got to get a plug in for my alma mater. That's the same university that vice presidential candidate Kamala Harris graduated from. Yes. So master's degree in accounting and financial management. Currently working on a PhD in business management, specializing in accounting. As for my affiliations with astrology organizations, a professional and life member of the American Federation of Astrologers. I have a level 1 certification with NCGR. I'm a certified teacher with the Church of Light based on the Brotherhood of Light lessons. I'm a certified practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming with the Association for Integrative Psychology. I'm president of the Friends of Astrology, and that organization has been in existence since 1938. So I'm a little proud about that. Treasurer of the Astrology News Service, and I serve as chairman of the board of Kepler College, where I do teach astropreneurship. So that's a little bit about me. And on to electional. So what is it? The primary aim is to identify the best date and time to start a project or event, such as starting a business, buying or selling a house, buying or selling a car, getting married. And while you don't see it on the screen, that does include getting divorced. Sometimes that happens. And also scheduling surgery in non-emergency situations. So I want to cover some general rules. So this is the number 1 rule, I think, for electional astrology. And so when you are looking at that election chart, keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that the election chart is a transit chart. That's it. And so we don't want any square aspects from the moon. You want to avoid that whenever possible. We use applying aspects only. So if
Can I ask really quickly?
Yes.
Why is that so important that there are no square aspects from the moon?
Great question, Stormie. Thank you for that. So that's important, ladies and gentlemen, because the square aspect represents challenges, barriers, tension. And with the electional chart, you want the energy to flow. You want everything to run smoothly, operate smoothly. You want everything to go according to plan. You want to pull it off without a hitch. So the moon, which is the fastest moving planetary body, if it is forming square aspects to any of the planets, that could speak to some challenge that may take away from the event being successful, or things may not go according to plan.
Okay. Check and check.
Okay, so next we use the Ptolemaic aspects only. So that would be the square, the opposition, the trine, the sextile, and the conjunction. So those are the Ptolemaic aspects. Again, the moon is the primary consideration. Why? It's the fastest moving body. We make it a point to keep Saturn out of the angles unless there is some benefit. So for example, Stormie, if you want to build a she shed in the backyard next spring, it's okay for Saturn to be in the fourth house.
Sure. And build solid structure.
Exactly. We want to keep Uranus and often Mars out of the angles, particularly if you are getting married. You don't want Uranus anywhere near the seventh house cusp. You just don't. You could find yourself suddenly and unexpectedly served with some divorce papers. Mars could just speak to quarrels, fighting, arguing. And you want to choose a rising sign that actually supports the matter. So for example, if you're going to take a trip, or especially a long distance trip, you may want to do what you can to put Sagittarius on the ascendant because Jupiter would rule that chart.
Okay.
Let's see. Now, the North Node is considered fortunate, the South Node unfavorable. The cardinal signs, fixed signs, and mutable signs matter. So with the cardinal signs, with electional astrology, you want it to happen like now, quickly, as soon as possible. With the fixed signs, you want this to something that will last and have some duration. So for example, with a marriage chart, we want our marriages to last. We want to be married to our significant other for a long time. So in that instance, you would look to have a fixed sign on the ascendant. And that's again, when possible. Mutable signs. If it's something you want to get into it quickly, get out of it quickly, then a mutable sign on the ascendant would help. You want to dignify planetary rulers, which suit the election. So for example, if you are planning some important speaking engagement, the planetary ruler for that would be Mercury. So you want to dignify Mercury by putting Mercury in Gemini.
Sure.
Let's see, interceptions and retrogrades are not detrimental. You want to avoid a missed moon aspect. And I actually included a chart today to show that. And we want to place challenged planets in favorable aspect to the angles and or rulers of the angles. So I just want to pause for a moment. Stormie, do you have any questions? Do we have any questions in the chat pod?
So far, no questions yet, but there's a tiny bit of a delay. So I'm sure a couple of them will come up. But I have a question. So in the way that you do your elections, do you practice, do you bring sect into it? You know, like would you bury a Malefic? Or is that, how do you work with that or not?
So you're asking, would I bury a Malefic?
Yes. So if you have, you know, if you've got the daytime chart or a nighttime chart, would you work with their traditional?
I see what you're saying. So that I do not include. That is something that I heard another astrologer speak to recently, and I think that's something for me to consider adding in.
Sure. Yeah, it was brought up in an election training that I was doing one-on-one with Matthew. We met actually, and he spoke a bit about, you know, let's practice burying the Malefic, and I had not necessarily considered to do that. So it's always interesting to see how people kind of got where they've got, even with the same practice.
Yeah, but that, what you just mentioned, I like that. And I just want to recognize that's certainly something for me to flavor into my practice of electional astrology. Yes.
Brilliant. Okay. All right. No questions that I can see so far. So far, we're going strong.
We're going strong. Okay, great. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a look at the Zodiacal Man. And so each zodiac sign is associated with a certain part of the body. And when the moon is occupying any particular zodiac sign, it is not the best time to have surgery on that part of the body. So, for example, if you're going to have some type of foot surgery, and on that particular day, the moon is in Pisces, see if you can, choose another day in which the moon is not in the zodiac sign of Pisces if you're going to have foot surgery that day. Why? Well, the moon rules water, and the human body is composed of approximately 70% water. And we know that scientists have confirmed that the full moon does have an effect on the tides of the oceans, which are the rise and fall of sea levels caused by the combined effects of gravitational forces exerted by the moon, sun, and rotation of the earth. And the tide flows more when there is a full moon and a new moon. What I would add to that is that the significance of the moon to me is just amazing. Some of you may be familiar that with baby sea turtles and how their life journey actually begins. And so the mother sea turtle makes her way out of the water and she, digs, I just want to say, a hole in the sand, and then she lays the eggs in the sand, and then she covers the eggs up with sand, and she makes her way back to the ocean. And then sometime later, the eggs hatch. And these little baby sea turtles, they dig their way out of the sand and then they make their way to the ocean. This could happen at night. And what's so is these little baby turtles on their very first journey, they make their way all the way back to where all the other adult turtles are. How are they able to do that? This is the first time. No one has ever taught them how to make this journey. Well, what the baby sea turtles seemingly are able to do, they are able to sense or some way detect the magnetic poles of the earth. And I want to add, in relationship to the moon, is how they navigate their way back. So I'm not a biologist, or more specifically, a herpetologist, but nevertheless, the baby sea turtles are able to plug into that energy, if you will, and make their way back to where all the other adult turtles are.
Well,
So I know nature and how we're all interconnected is amazing. So
and
let's
all I
take
keep seeing is Finding Nemo. That's where I'm at. Okay, I want to just pause you for just a quick second because we do have a question.
Okay, great. What's the
Okay,
question?
so it's a short question to the North Node in this particular method. What if the North Node is on the angles of the ICMC? Is this still considered fortunate?
Well, the North Node is considered fortunate and the South Node is considered unfavorable. And what so is, we want to keep in mind what is the nature of the election.
Right. Okay.
So in one scenario, having the nodes close to the MC and the IC could increase the risk of an unfavorable outcome. But on the other hand, if the desired outcome is an unfavorable outcome, then you would be willing to take that risk. So it really depends on what is the nature of the election and the desired outcome.
Awesome. And the other question we have is to explain burying the malefic. And essentially, what that means is depending on which chart you have, day or night, the planet that acts as the malefic or the one that causes the most problems in that particular sect chart, you want to get it away from your election. If you're trying to speak, you want to, and you have a daytime chart, you want to get Mars away from whatever it is that you're trying to do, and you would want to amplify where Jupiter is at. So that's what that means.
Okay. Thank you, Stormie. Thank you. So let's take a look at the Zodiacal Man. And so some of you may be familiar with medical astrology. I'm not a medical astrologer. So this is a general chart, if you will, of the Zodiacal Man. And I do know that there are some medical astrologers who can actually go into this with a little more detail. But here, what we have, Aries rules the head to include the upper jaw here and above, and Taurus rules the throat and the lower jaw. So that's the lower jaw and the throat. Gemini rules the shoulders, the arms, the hands, and the lungs. Cancer, the breast and stomach. Leo, heart and spine. Virgo, the intestines. Libra, the kidneys and lower back. Scorpio, the reproductive organs. Sagittarius, the hips and thighs. Capricorn, the knees, the skeletal structure, bones, and I want to add teeth. And Aquarius rules the ankles, and Pisces rules the feet. So this is the Zodiacal Man. So for any individual, if you have to have open heart surgery, hopefully that's not the case. But if it is, you would want to do what you can to avoid the moon being in Leo that day. Again, the human body is 75% water, and the moon also rules blood. So we want to keep that in mind as well. In some instances, we have little to no choice as to when the surgery will occur. The doctor is the one who dictates when the surgery will occur. So sometimes, you just have to be with it. So with that, pray and hope for the best. But if it is elective and you have some say so as to when you want to have the surgery, share that with the doctor. You don't have to mention astrology per se, but just let the doctor know you want to choose a different date. And as an electional astrologer, when clients come to me to ask about surgery, usually those surgeries are scheduled in the morning. Like, say they have to show up at 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m. So I'm usually working with time frames between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. because doctors, generally speaking, schedule those surgeries at the very beginning of their day.
And it's always interesting, though, even under a really good election, when it comes to stuff like that, how sometimes that's just not the plan. That timing is just not the plan, and then it works out how it works out. So it's interesting that it's like, yes, this is but I don't know if you found this in those situations where we've elected the most auspicious timing for this event. And then the person goes and it doesn't happen at that event, but something usually pops in at the time that we've elected. Have you found that?
Yeah. So in the case of one client who the surgery was scheduled, well, she had to be at the hospital at a certain time, but then there's the prep and then the waiting. And then the doctor arrives, and that's when you go into the operating room, so to speak. That could easily be 90 minutes to 2 hours later.
Yeah.
And that's a whole different chart. So with that, when we talk about electional astrology, we really want to keep in mind the intention. What is the intention? So focus on that intention. Focus the intention into that event. And so even though it may start, especially in the case of surgery, at a later time, again, 90 minutes later or 2 hours later, just really in your head and your heart, focus on the intention and allow that to help support the energy vibration of the surgery, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had a client, it was great. We were electing a time for she and her husband to travel and have this really awesome trip that they were going on. We elect the time, okay, fly in the morning. And they did not get to fly in the morning, but because in the time that we had elected, because they didn't get to fly at that time, their flight was free and upgraded to go later. So it was like, yeah, still super auspicious. You got free stuff. Right?
Exactly.
You got free stuff and an upgrade.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So this is great. This is great because the next chart that I want to share with everyone is a travel chart. So this is a client who took a trip to Florida. I think he was in Atlanta. Yeah, he was in Atlanta, Georgia, and he was taking a trip to Florida. So this is the day and time of the trip. So if some of you may be wondering, the time that's used here of 7:30 a.m., this is the time in which the client left home going to the airport. So the birth of the election occurs when the individual no longer has control over the situation. So for example, if you use electional astrology and you want to send an email to a certain person about a certain subject matter at a certain time, the moment you press the send button or the moment you press enter and that message is sent, you no longer have control over it.
Okay.
And even if by chance you can recall that message in that moment, that was your intention. The intention was set at the moment you press the enter button. So this time of 7:30 a.m. is when the client left home. Now, some of you may be wondering, well, what if the client forgot a suitcase and had to go back in the house and get the suitcase that was forgotten? Well, had that happened, let's just say that took 10 minutes. Then the birth of this chart would be 7:40 a.m., not 7:30 a.m. And that's not the same chart. So even though it's 10 minutes later, the angles are different and the position of the moon has changed. And sometimes the moon is moving as fast as 13 degrees in one day, which is a very fast moon. So the moon could even change signs, I guess. So it's when when you cross the threshold and you're not coming back until you return from the trip, that's the birth time for the trip. So here are some questions, general questions that I like to ask. And I kind of get these questions from the only astrology book you'll ever need. Excuse me. No, that's not it. It's a book by March and McEvers, Horary and Electional Astrology. It's from their 6-book series. But anyway, it's March and McEvers. They're the authors. And these are some things that they recommend you look for with electional astrology. So number one, are there any square aspects from the moon?
Okay.
Are the sun, moon, Venus, and Jupiter above the horizon? So that will not always be the case, ladies and gentlemen. There's no such thing as a perfect chart. It's not. They're going to be trade-offs. Number three, is the ruler of the chart well placed by zodiacal sign and house position? Number four, are there favorable aspects to the ascendant and midheaven? Number five, are any malefics found in the angles of the chart?
Okay.
So we're going to look at the chart next. But the question is, will this trip be fun and adventurous based on the answers to these questions in consideration of the election chart? So here, let's say I'll put my grapes to the side so that I can work with the screen a little bit better. So I'll enlarge my screen in just a moment, but I want to just take a look at the questions. So there is one square aspect from the moon in this chart, and the moon is in Taurus, and so we know the moon is exalted in Taurus, but the moon is in a square aspect to Jupiter. Jupiter is still the greater benefic. In this chart, only Jupiter in Leo is above the horizon. Jupiter is the ruler of the chart, and it is very well placed by house position and zodiacal sign. So let me enlarge that for us. And so here, Jupiter is the ruler of the chart, and we can see Jupiter is in the 9th house in the zodiac sign of Leo. So this is a very well placed Jupiter. In addition to that, Venus in Sagittarius trines Jupiter in Leo. So that Venus in Sagittarius, Venus is in the 1st house, ladies and gentlemen, at 21 degrees of Sagittarius, and it trines Jupiter in the 9th. And obviously, you see the sun is right there, conjoined, making a conjunction to the ascendant, and Mercury is actually making a conjunction to the ascendant. And so Mercury in Sagittarius and the sun in Sagittarius conjoin the ascendant. Uranus in Aries also trines the ascendant. Now, while you see that Uranus is at 12 degrees of Aries and the ascendant is at 11 degrees of Sagittarius, note that Uranus is in retrograde motion. So Uranus is approaching or moving towards the ascendant.
Okay.
Also, the Sun in Sagittarius and Jupiter in Leo are in mutual reception. So because these two planets are in mutual reception, they're working together as a team. And considering that Jupiter's in the ninth and the Sun conjoins the ascendant, oh, this travel chart is looking very, very good. Also, Uranus in Aries in the fourth house makes an exact square to Pluto in Capricorn in the first. So a few moments ago, you heard me say, there's no such thing as a perfect chart. Well, this would be one of the imperfections of this chart. The moon is exalted. The moon in Taurus is exalted. And that moon, where is the moon? In the fifth house. The fifth house is the house of entertainment. When you take a trip, you travel, one of the highlights is entertainment, especially if you go to Las Vegas.
Okay. Yes. And I want to just say this really quick in case you're watching and you're kind of new or you're just getting into your practice. Omari is able to move that quickly through the aspects because you learn to see them and calculate what's what in your head. So if you're not there yet where you can't see the aspects without the lines, I just want you to know that that is what's happening and you will get it. You will get it. It's going to be a sextile if they're two different elements, but they're compatible because when the planets have sex, that's good for us, right? You'll remember these things. So they have to be different but compatible. So you'll get that. I just want to throw that in there in case your head is spinning because I remember when I was learning aspects, I was like, how did they see that? How do you? And it comes. It comes.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Stormie. And ladies and gentlemen, I totally and completely co-sign on what Stormie just shared with you. It is something that comes over time. And as you begin to learn more about astrology and practice astrology, it'll come. Now, this last little section here, it says, remember that the electional chart should bear some degree of harmony with the natal chart of the native. If not, the eventual outcome may prove to be undesirable. And notice I said may prove to be undesirable. So that's the travel chart. So let's look at, now this is a bi-wheel, as everyone can see. Now, the election chart that we just looked at is on the inner wheel. No. The election chart is the outer wheel, but everything has shifted because we're looking at the birth chart of my client. So the birth chart of my client, this client has Leo rising and Aries on the cusp of the ninth house, long distance travel. So again, we want to look to see if there is harmony between the event chart and the birth chart of the individual. So I want to touch on the Jupiter. So in the election chart, Jupiter was at 22 degrees of Leo. Jupiter actually trines the Sun and Mars in the ninth house. Now, Jupiter is separating from the Sun, but it's still the Sun. So if it's the Sun or the Moon and it's 1 degree separating, I will still count it. However, the Jupiter is making an approaching trine. It's applying to Mars. Mars is the ruler of the ninth house. We also have Venus. Venus is in the fifth house at 21 degrees. Venus is the house of entertainment. Venus at 21 degrees is making an exact trine to my client's natal sun at 21 degrees of Aries in the ninth house.
Yeah.
It's exact to the degree. And then Venus, would also be making a trine aspect to my client's natal Mars. And again, Mars is the ruler of the ninth house. There's some other things we can look at, but just based on this information alone, do you think my client had a good time?
Yes. Well, please, your client's a Leo rising, right? So
Yes, the client is Leo rising.
they were on their way to a good time with or without this chart.
I think so too. I think so too. And I will add also that in the election chart, the sun is at 11 degrees of Sagittarius, also making a trine aspect to my client's natal ascendant at 15 degrees of Leo. So what it is, I want to share a treat with you. So the client actually took a few moments to share a follow-up letter with me about his trip to Florida. So I'll just touch on a few things. So one, the client says, I crossed the threshold of the house exactly at the assigned time and didn't turn back. Let's see, my client says he actually forgot about the chart, the interpretation and predictions as he dodged and weaved in and out of burgeoning morning commuter traffic. And upon arrival at Hartfield Jackson International Airport, he felt stressed thinking of all the regulations and checkpoints he had to endure to get to the gate. While he was there, he unknowingly met and conversed with an airline company manager with over 20 years in the business. And, you meet people, they had a casual conversation, and it turns out that the gentleman who he met had been living in Florida off and on for some years and kept a place there that he rented out through an agent when he was away. And so the airline company manager, gave my client some details on how to do the same and make it profitable. And the airline company manager offered my client the telephone number and that of his agent in Miami. And for my client, that's key because knowledge and connections make the world go round. And so my client continues to say that the flight was pretty much like any other, except, oh, did I forget to mention that I was offered a free upgrade to first class? So it wasn't exactly like any other after all. Again, I thought about the predictions, this time with a big fat grin plastered all over my face. Nothing like a cocktail in first class to take the stress away. In sunny Miami, he was introduced to a friend of a friend who offered to show him around town. That individual was born and reared in Miami, and she shared experiences about the culture, climate, and the hot spots. And after almost an entire day driving around, my client felt not so fearful and ignorant about what life is like from an insider's perspective and what it could be like for him. He learned everything from where the lady got her manicures and pedicures to the ideal yet affordable real estate to the history of the neighborhoods and the best beaches. So my client concludes with timing is everything, and to leave his house without a plan and gain so much info, connections, and let's not forget, first class seating was no coincidence. The astro gods were with me.
Yeah.
So this is a letter from the client. And so, of course, this follow-up email comes after the trip is experienced, but out of the gate, I mean, that election chart for the trip was just like great. I almost want to say it was perfect in
Right. It was a
terms
good
of
chart.
the alignment between the event chart and the client's natal chart. So Stormie, I want to pause and see if there are any questions from you or anyone in our audience today.
So I know, and I think I saw it a little bit further up, and I was just going to wait for you to get here. But somebody was asking, how do you create an election chart?
Oh, wow. How do you create an election
Right?
chart?
That's a good question. Right here, we are all in it.
Yeah, I know. I'm right. We just dove in. Okay, so great question. Whoever asked, thank you. How do I create an election chart? So a client reaches out to me. For example, this particular client reached out to me to say, I'm thinking about taking a trip within the next 30 to 60 days. And so when I hear that information, that lets me know to look at, where is it? Here it is, right here. Got to show it to everybody. So I'll bring out my ephemeris. Look at Stormie doing the same thing. Love you, Stormie. Love you for that. Love you for that.
This is the magic.
This is the right. So Stormie and I are both holding up ephemerides, and this is the starting point for electional astrology. And you open it up. Actually, I have it open up to November. I know you can't see that, but this is a Raphael's ephemeris, and that's my starting point. So in the case of that client, I want to say we talked in October of that year, and between November and December, 60 days out, he wanted to take the trip. So I just open it up and I look through the ephemeris and I find a day and time in which the planetary aspects are not only favorable, but more specifically, are they favorable for a long distance trip? And in addition to that, does that event chart have some harmony with the native chart of the individual?
Okay.
But that's where it starts.
This is where it starts. You got to figure out where everybody's at and where they're going. And by everybody, I mean planets. Where are
Yes.
they at and where are they going? So, point of clarity, someone says here, do you start with the query focusing on the ascendant?
Oh, okay. So I do not, because that's when you use the word query, I associate that with horary astrology, and I'm not a horary astrologer, at least not at this time in my career.
I know you
So
could be next year. We don't know.
I
We don't
could be
know.
right. Yeah, maybe next year, maybe next year. But in any case, I did not start with the query. I literally, when my client said, I'm thinking about taking a trip to Florida within the next 30 to 60 days, I just started with that, pulled out the ephemeris and went to work.
Okay. Very good. Very, very good. And this does, to do electional, you do need to advance along a little bit. There is some real training that comes with it so that you can understand, if you're doing it by hand or if you're using a system, what does the timing need to be to get the rising sign that you desire? That's
Yeah.
why the training around these particular techniques is important. So
Yeah,
just throw
and
that out
so and thank you for that, Stormy. And ladies and gentlemen, with electional astrology, it does require some attention to the mathematics because the planets are moving at different speeds. They change directions. They go from direct motion to retrograde motion, from retrograde motion to direct motion. And then sometimes they form aspects to the ascendant or the midheaven. Is that a favorable aspect, such as a trine sextile, or is that a hard aspect, such as a square or opposition? So, a handful of things that we have to take into consideration, and there's just some attention we have to give to the math and the
Yep.
motion of the planets, or I should say, planetary motion.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay.
I
So
think we're
let's
ready for
see.
the next one.
We're ready for the next one. Okay, so
Business openings. I love these.
business openings. So some people at one point in time in their life or another, they want to open a business. And I think that's a great thing. I really do. Stormy has done it. I've done it. And many of you in the audience today, you've done it. But there, again, electional astrology is a valuable tool. So this here is the birth chart of a business. And I can share with you that this particular business, this is a birth chart of a metaphysical bookstore. So in this metaphysical bookstore, they would sell, you could buy chakra stones, you could buy a dream catcher, you could buy astrology books, numerology books, just any kind of book related to spirituality and metaphysics. Um, oh, they sold wind chimes. I mean, when I first visited the store, I thought the inventory was just great in terms of the selection, the quality of the items, and the amount of items. But in any case, it's a metaphysical bookstore. And so I will say this, I did not do this chart. So this election chart is not my work. I can share with you that the owners of the bookstore, they were familiar with astrology, but they were not astrologers. They were not professional astrologers, but they were familiar with astrology. And so we see, let's look at the moon. We'll start there. The moon is at 21 degrees of Virgo and in the eighth house. And what is the moon doing? The moon is forming a square aspect to not only the sun, but also to Pluto. And so, while again, the moon is separating from the square because it's both the sun and the moon, I count it. It's 1 degree separating, but I count it because it's the luminaries. And the moon is also forming a square aspect to Pluto. Um, Saturn, if you look at Saturn, Saturn is at 25 degrees of Leo in the 7th house. Now, for those of you who are familiar with dignity, detriment, fall, and exaltation, Saturn is accidentally exalted in the 7th house. And if you're wondering why, that's because in a flat chart where we put Aries on the ascendant, that would put Libra on the descendant, and Saturn is exalted in Libra. So Saturn is accidentally exalted because of its house placement,
Sure.
not by its zodiacal sign. But if you look at that Saturn at 25 degrees of Leo, it makes a square to the midheaven, 25 degrees of Scorpio. And if you take a look at this Saturn is stationary. So this Saturn is in the process of changing direction. So it's going to be at 25 degrees of Leo for a few years by progression. And not only that, well, there, I guess to some degree, Saturn does trine Pluto. But let's continue. So we have Venus at 1 degree of Capricorn in the 11th house. I don't think Venus likes Capricorn.
She's not comfortable there.
I don't think Venus likes Capricorn at all. That's not a good placement for Venus in a business chart. Venus is the lesser benefic. We don't want the lesser benefic to be impaired in any way. I also want to take a look at Neptune and Uranus, and we can see that Uranus and Neptune are in mutual reception. Uranus is in Pisces and Neptune is in Aquarius. So those two planets are in mutual reception. Neptune is the ruler of the 2nd house, and that would represent the resources of the business, or the assets of the business. And I will add that the inventory of the business, and inventory is an asset. The inventory of the business did diminish from the time the business opened from the time it opened over the first year and a half. And what do I mean by diminished? When I first went into the store, I mean, the inventory selection was great, but like over a year and a half, bookshelves were empty. They didn't have the same amount of inventory. I want to say the quality was pretty much the same, but you could look and clearly see, oh, this isn't the same amount of variety of inventory that they had a year and a half later compared to what they started out with in the very beginning.
Sure.
So let's move forward and let's look at the declinations. Now, some of you may be wondering, what are declinations? So we want to keep in mind that we exist in a 3-dimensional reality. And when we look at, oh, I don't have one handy. But when we look at a chart on a piece of paper, when we look at an astrology chart on a piece of paper, it's a flat piece of paper. You cannot see the 3rd dimension. So we can look at planetary longitude and latitude as the x-axis and the y-axis, where the x-axis is horizontal from left to right, the y-axis is vertical up and down, and then you have the z-axis, and you can't see the z-axis because it's right in front of you. It's right there where the x-axis and the x-axis and the y-axis actually intersect. Right at that point is the z-axis, and it exists. So when we look at these declinations, planetary declinations for the birth chart of this business, what really stands out is Venus. Venus is out of bounds.
Out of bounds, yeah.
And so not only is Venus in Capricorn, where it's not comfortable, it doesn't like Capricorn, this Venus is out of bounds. It is beyond the boundary of the sun. So if you're wondering what is that boundary, it's 23 degrees and 27 minutes north or south of the equator. So again, it's 23 degrees and 27 minutes north or south of the equator. And this Venus is beyond that boundary. And so this doesn't bode well for Venus. One, in that it's in Capricorn, and another, it's out of bounds.
And we talked about that. If you didn't get the opportunity to watch that particular eat and greet with Tony Howard, where we talked about out of bounds planets, check it out, because Venus out of bounds, she's doing the most. You know, it's very idealistic and up there in Capricorn, maybe a very big vision of what this business was going to be, despite maybe what it actually had available.
Exactly. And I want to say that I really believe that the owners, their heart was in it. And they really, truly desired for that to be a successful business. I think they had a great vision, but that did not match reality. And there's one other thing I'd like to add is that when this business was started, the big box bookstores existed. So, you know, some of us remember when you could go to Borders and hang out all day long. Or what's the other one? Borders.
Barnes and Noble.
Yeah, thank you. Barnes and Noble, exactly, where they had what? 100,000 square feet of nothing but books. And then they had a little cafe. You could sit down and read books and hang out all day long. Yeah. And so, and then not only that, we had the online retailer, Amazon. You know, Amazon gained a lot of traction, you know, selling books. Of course, they expanded, you know, their offering, but at the time, how could literally a mom and pop metaphysical bookstore effectively compete with Barnes and Noble, with Borders and Amazon? So that's considered the outer plane weather. And, you know, when you want to start a business, marketing research is key, but that's for a business class. Let's stay focused on the astrology.
We'll be in a business class in no time.
Okay, so some questions. These are the same 5 questions. Are there any square aspects from the moon? Are the sun, moon, Venus, and Jupiter above the horizon? Is the ruler of the chart well placed by zodiacal sign and house position? Are there favorable aspects to the ascendant and midheaven? Are any malefics found in the angles of the chart? Well, the final question is, was this business successful? No. This business was not successful. After about 1.5 years to no more than 2 years, the business did close. And I just want to go back to this natal chart and just highlight or just share that I really believe that, of course, the owners had good intentions without question. But I believe that when they saw Jupiter, Mars, and Mercury in the 10th house, all in Sagittarius, and this is a relatively tight stellium, and it's in the 10th house, I really truly believe that when they saw that, it was like, yeah, woohoo, we're going to be millionaires. I really believe that when they saw that, that was really the oomph to, yeah, let's start the business on this day at this time. But again, those other, you know, aspects that, you know, we talked to just a few moments ago, that was not the outcome. So there's no such thing as a perfect chart. And you want to look at the election chart holistically. And essentially, you want the favorable aspects to outweigh the unfavorable aspects. And you want those favorable aspects to be more powerful and outnumber the unfavorable aspects. And those are some things that lead to a good or successful election chart.
Yeah, and I think they were wise or attempting to be by putting Aquarius, the astrology, on the ascendant. It was a good thought. Okay.
It was, but I want to add one thing since you mentioned the ascendant. Now, for those of you who are familiar with horary astrology, you know that when the ascendant is less than 3 degrees, it's too soon. And when the ascendant is greater than 27 degrees, but not more than, but it hasn't reached 0 degrees yet, it's too late. And I have learned that that same, we'll just call it principle, that same principle applies to electional astrology as well. And with 2 degrees of Aquarius and 44 minutes on the ascendant, it may have been appropriate for them to wait until a later time to start this business. And I just share that with you as a possibility. But had they reached out to me, I would have said, well, let's at least put 3 degrees and 20 minutes of Aquarius on the ascendant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, so far it sounds like we're getting it. People are slowly sinking in down here, which is always great. You know, when we present a technique, it's like if you're even getting a piece of it within the 60 plus minutes we're doing all right.
Yeah, I agree. And electional is somewhat technical because we really have to focus in on some of the math. And let's see. So any questions, Stormie? Any questions here? Here, let me eat another grape or two. Hold on.
Yeah, please do. So far, you guys, do you have questions or what are you thinking about? What's brewing for you down there? Somebody is really like tapping in and getting what's going on. So they're like, thank you for the ascendant reminder about that. And so this is kind of neat to see it all come together. But I think so far we're cruising. We're moving right along. This watermelon has been sacrificed. I'm over here enjoying it while you talk.
Okay. All right. So, and I'm enjoying the grapes as well. I am the sweet grapes and no seeds. I love them like that.
Yeah, it's a workout.
Okay, so here's one. This is a letter of resignation. So earlier, ladies and gentlemen, I talked about the void of course moon. And in this example, you see a very good use of a void of course moon. And this is actually my letter of resignation. And I sent this email on Monday, February 2nd, 2015 at 10:55 a.m. And I had to resign from this position because, let's see, so I had a full-time job. The full-time opportunity ended. And so this was an adjunct faculty position or part-time position. And of course, when you work part-time, you don't earn the same amount of money that you earned when you were working full-time. And at the time, I had recently went out and purchased a brand new Chevy Camaro 2SS fully loaded, all the bells and whistles. And so because of the reduction in income, I needed access to my 401k plan. And so in order to get money out of the 401k plan, one of my options was to resign from the organization or resign from the position and request a distribution or rollover. And in the process, get some money, take care of a few bills, put a little stash to the side and keep living life. And so I reached out to my manager, and my manager informed me that she understood and that submit the letter of resignation. And when I worked through everything, reapply for the position, and she would, make sure that I at a minimum was re-interviewed or just, bring me right back into the organization. So I did that. And so these are the same 5 questions that we saw previously. Are there any square aspects from the moon? Are the sun, moon, Venus, and Jupiter above the horizon? Is the ruler of the chart well placed by zodiacal sign and house position? Are there favorable aspects to the ascendant and midheaven? And are any malefics found in the angles of the chart? So this is the chart. So there are no square aspects from the moon. The moon is void of course, and the moon is dignified in Cancer and is in the 4th house. The moon cannot be any stronger. It just can't. It just can't. Unless it was making a trine aspect maybe to the sun or Venus or Jupiter. Venus is the ruler of the chart. And Venus is exalted in Pisces in the 11th house. Venus conjoins Neptune in Pisces. So some of you may question that particular aspect. Well, was it really my bona fide and genuine heart's desire to resign from the position? No, it wasn't. I just needed to get that money out of my 401k plan so that I could keep my Chevy Camaro, because they weren't going to get it back. I wasn't going to give it back to them.
Like
I
them
wasn't going to
books.
let them take it away from me either.
Like those books. You were like, I have it. It's mine. See, you can't have a relationship. Because if it even attempts to go sideways, you're going to be like, well, I'm sorry, you can't leave. So I don't know what you're going to do.
I know. So, but nevertheless, so let me expand this chart so that we can see it a little closer. So I just spoke to the aspects. And again, ladies and gentlemen, this was, I want to say, in my case, a perfect use of a void of course moon. And what do we mean by void of course? As you can see, the moon is at 29 degrees of Cancer. None of the other planets are at 29 degrees of a zodiac sign. So the moon will not make an aspect to another planet until after it leaves Cancer and moves into Leo. So that's what we mean by a void of course moon. The moon will not be making any major aspects to any of the planetary bodies until after it transits or moves into the very next zodiac sign.
And typically, well, it's typically thought of that like you just kind of shut down life during a void of course, but there are smart ways to use it, just like Omari's pointing out, to make a nice exit out of something. I typically like void of course moons, just depending on what sign they're in, because it's usually I nap during them and it's like the planet falls away. Like nobody wants to have an appointment at that time, so I really love it. I use those and I nap. Other people get work done because it's kind of quieting.
Yeah, I like that. I like that analogy, a quieting, quieting, if you will. I like that analogy. So another good use for a void of course moon, if you have to file taxes in the United States or even in the country where you reside, mail your taxes. If you mail them, or even if you file them electronically, do so on a void of course moon. And the potential, again, the potential benefit of that is that it may help you avoid an audit. I read that in a book. I did. I believe it. I see you, Stormie. I see you.
Anything that protects my money, right? Anything that protects my money. I'm going to be over here. I'm going to be like, look, Veronica, I can't come in until 2:03, and then I need you to push the button right then. That's going to be me, Stormie 2021, void of course tax filing.
Yes. Yeah, so that's another good use of a void of course moon. And speaking of void of course, ladies and gentlemen, this concept of a void of course is applicable to other planets, namely Venus and Mars. You don't want to get married when Venus is retrograde or Mars is retrograde. Don't do that. Now, the sun and the moon never turn retrograde. So the sun is the significator for the groom or the husband. The moon is a significator for the woman or the wife. And then Venus is a secondary significator for the woman or the wife. And Mars is the same for the man. So when you get married and you want to elect a time to get married, you don't want Venus to be retrograde. You don't want Mars to be retrograde.
Sure. And one of the things I just want to throw this in,
yes.
I have found in these elections, especially around marriage, if you are a same sex marriage, it's fine. One of you is carrying a different frequency. One of you is a bit more keyed to Mars and the other one is going to be more keyed to Venus. So it doesn't matter. So in
I agree.
Consider this in the new way that things are happening out there.
This the new paradigm. We'll look at it. Let's frame it as a new paradigm, and I hope everybody's okay with that. But I totally and completely agree with my colleague Stormie that even when it's a same gender relationship, the way the energy works out, one will be more tuned to Mars, and the other one will be more tuned to Venus. And again, the gender thing is a earth plane thing.
Yes.
Energy is energy.
Yep.
Energy is energy. What else do you want me to say? Energy
is
energy.
That is it. That's why energetically, as you get to know these planets, because it is not your astrologer saying you have to identify as male or female. We're telling you these are the energies that go together. Right?
Yes.
If not, they're like magnets. They will bounce off of each other. So figure out who your key is in your relationship, who are you keyed to? And then as you do your election, that's something that you can consider. And you can consider, with other things in the relationship as well.
Yes. I agree. So Stormie, I'm enjoying myself, and I recognize that the time has passed. So I actually have, I think, 2 more charts to show. One is about a credit card application, and the other one is actually a marriage chart.
Let's see the marriage chart.
Okay, let's see the marriage chart. Okay, so let's move forward to the marriage chart. So let's see. So ladies and gentlemen, I did not elect this marriage chart. This marriage chart was elected by both the bride and the groom. The bride and the groom, both of them are professional astrologers. The groom had been studying astrology and had students and practiced astrology for over 70 years. His wife did the same for over 30 years. She didn't ride his coattails. He did not ride her coattails. They were equitably, I almost want to say in their case, as professional astrologers, they were equally yoked. Nice. And they decided that they wanted to get married. Both of them were getting remarried. And they both went off to their separate corners of the house, and they did an election chart. And this is the date and the time that they came up with. Now, I do want to add that both of them are Taurians, just like Stormie. Let's see, the wife was born on May 8th. The husband was born on May 7th, or that might be in a reverse. But in any case, they're both Taurians. And they were looking for a chart that was in harmony with them. Let's see. So this is a new moon chart at 12 degrees of Virgo. Yeah. The moon parallels the midheaven at 2 degrees north. Venus is in Libra in the 11th house. On a marriage chart, do you want Venus in Libra? Yes. If you can get Venus in Libra, you want Venus in Libra. Venus and Jupiter are parallel at 14 degrees south. Venus is the lesser benefic. Jupiter is the greater benefic. Now, so when I say they're parallel, for those of you who are new, think of a parallel as a conjunction. When 2 planets are contra-parallel, think of that as an opposition. We also see that both the midheaven and the descendant are ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is the highest planet in the sky and disposited by Venus. So some of you may be wondering, well, what does that mean? Well, Mercury is in Libra and Venus rules Libra. So that's what I mean by Mercury is disposited by Venus. And again, the bride and the groom are Taurians, May 8th and May 7th, respectively. Question, will their marriage be a good one?
Oh, yeah.
Let me enlarge this chart for the audience. The answer to the question is yes. This marriage was a good marriage for both of them. This new moon at 12 degrees of Virgo made a trine aspect to both of their natal suns. And it also happens that the bride, her natal moon was also in Taurus.
I'm not going to lie. I really like this Jupiter and Scorpio placement in the 11th as well. You know, just a strong friendship in general underneath there. But that probably led them to a lot of what is really going on here conversations.
Oh, okay. So let me just speak to that very quickly. Ladies and gentlemen, the groom was born in 1910 and the bride was born in the late 40s. I do know what year, but I don't think it's polite for a gentleman to say a woman's age. But I will concede and say she was born in the late 40s. So, you know, there was like a 35 plus year difference between the two of them. So those conversations, Stormy, that you were just referencing, you spot on. Yes. But obviously, with that age difference between the two of them, it wasn't like, you know, two people in their 20s rolling in the hay after the midnight hour.
Right.
It was I want to say it was a spiritual connection between the two of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was almost a fated relationship because there was a direct connection between his natal sun and her natal moon. I think there was a conjunction. So it
Beautiful.
was a fated relationship. And according to the story, when they met at an astrology conference, they talked for about 4 or 5 hours and they were closing the restaurant. The restaurant, you know, they were like, we're closing now, you have to leave. And they stayed in communication with one another. They lived in different states. She lived in the Chicago, Illinois area. He lived in Florida. And the following year, they got married.
Yeah.
They got married, and they're astrologers, and you just look and you talk about that energy. Stormy just made a reference to that energy, and you know the energy is what brought them together.
Yeah. How beautiful. Oh,
Hmm.
I
And
love it.
the marriage lasted one Jupiter cycle, 12 years. And the bride, I mean, excuse me, the groom did precede his bride in death. So the husband died, but the marriage lasted for 12 years, like one Jupiter cycle.
Yeah. It's always amazing to go back and see cyclically how things have lasted or when they're about to make a move as well.
Hmm.
You know, I
Hmm.
knew that in my business. It was get ready to turn 7, and I was like, here we go. Here we go.
Yes, 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 yes. So that's the marriage chart. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, um, okay, we'll do the missed moon aspect like very, very quickly, because I know some of you may have other things to do. So this is missed moon chart number one. So I want you to give attention to two planets. I want you to pay attention to the sun, and I want you to pay attention to the moon. In this chart here, ladies and gentlemen, we have the sun at 29 degrees of Taurus and 50 minutes in the first house, and we have the moon at 13 degrees of Scorpio and 44 minutes in the sixth house. Well, you know, we might be thinking, oh, there's going to be a full moon with, you know, with Taurus and Scorpio. Well, when we look at this chart here, the second chart, what we find is that even before the moon can catch up with the sun has made its way into the next zodiac sign of Gemini. So, will there be another full moon? Yeah, there will be, but it won't happen between the sun being in Taurus and the moon being in Scorpio this time.
Sure. So
So,
that's the missed moon.
that's the missed moon aspect. So if you're planning something using electional astrology and you really want to take advantage of the moon, you got to make sure that planet that is making an aspect to doesn't move to the next zodiac sign before the moon gets there. It's like the moon showed up and the party is over.
Right. Came in all late.
Yeah, all late, probably somewhat wrong, and things of that nature. So I just wanted to share that missed moon aspect. And the planetary hours, ladies and gentlemen, this is simply a way to refine electional astrology. So, for example, on the day you get married, if you can, get married during a Venus hour. And so let me just share this with you. So the rulership of the planetary hours depend upon the days of the week, of which there are seven, which correspond to the seven ancient planets. The sun, Sunday, moon, well, Monday is the moon, Tuesday is Mars, Wednesday is Mercury, Thursday is Jupiter, Friday is Venus, and Saturday is Saturn. And they go in that specific order, the Chaldean order, which is here in the middle of the slide. Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, and the moon. And that's the order that they go in. And what it is with respect to the planetary hours, from sunrise to sunset, we make a note of how many hours and minutes, and you divide that by 12. And every hour corresponds to one of those planets based on the Chaldean order. So on this particular day, which was, this corresponds to the day of that business chart of December that I showed you earlier. And sunrise was at 7:09, sunset was at 4:20 for a difference of 9 hours, 11 minutes, 551 minutes. We divide that by 12, and each hour will be 45 minutes and 55 seconds of time. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that business was opened during a Mercury hour. So that business opened at 10 a.m. And so so the Mercury hour, Lord, the business opened at 10 a.m. and 10:12, I think Venus. So prior to that, it was Venus. Oh, and right after that, it was Mercury. And so Mercury does speak to books. It does. Mercury speaks to books, and they did have people come and speak there. That's a Mercury ruled event. And then you would do the same thing for the night. So from sunset to the following sunrise, you do the same thing, divide that by 12, and then follow the Chaldean order based on the day. So for example, today is Monday. So the first hour of today, we would start with the moon.
Right.
Okay. And that's how to reach me. If anyone wants to reach out to me, I am here. And Stormie, let me say, Sister Stormie, thank you for inviting Brother Omari. I've enjoyed hanging out with you today, and thank you for introducing me to your audience of listeners. Know that I wish you all the best and much success, and may the great architect of the universe continue to bless you and all that you hold dear.
Thank you so much for coming. And we've already got stuff in the comment section saying, invite him back real soon, please. Real soon. I'm like, yes, he brought snacks. He brought astrology nourishment. You got that outfit on. I mean, it just has come together today.
Yeah. Oh, and look, and you know, I see that I got that hourglass as a part of that background for you, Electional Astrology.
Pulled together. What is your rising sign?
My rising sign is Leo.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm not mad at that at all. I'm a Virgo rising. We're neighbors. That's fine.
Yes, yes, yes. So again, thank you, Stormie. Thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure. Feel free to follow up with me if you're interested, and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, you guys, thank you so much for showing up. And hopefully in this last hour and some change, we gave you something that was absolutely worth your time to show up. I look forward to seeing you again this week. We will be back on Thursday with the Eat and Greet. We'll have Louise Eddington here, and she is going to talk about Ceres. So if you're interested in the asteroids, or you just like eating with people on the Eat and Greets, she's already planning her snacks. So come on over, and we look forward to seeing you guys there. Bye.